Okay, today we're going to cover literature in the form of plays, short stories, articles, essays, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. So I've been spending a ton of time piecemealing all of this together. And what I've found is it's not complete, but I want to give you an idea of some of the books that I will be reading to Morgan. This is all read aloud literature that I will read to her. Her books that she chooses to read are probably going to change a whole bunch of times. Some of them are still wrapped up here that she chooses. There's a whole bunch over there. There's twice as many in her room. Those are going to be more her style and whatever she likes to read, the entertainment of it, more of the grade school books that you generally see online. The ones that I'm giving you or showing you are the ones that I'm going to read aloud to her because she's very interested in this type of thing, this type of literature, these types that I've picked for her. And kids, for the most part, from what I've seen, are hugely capable of understanding way more than they are able to read. So with this, read alouds are kind of nice because you can talk about hotter or heavier topics like deeper meanings or trickier topics or more sensitive topics. You can read aloud to them and kind of guide them through it, and it can be a sociology or a social studies topic as well. So with that, I'm also going to interweave articles and essays and maybe poetry in and around the novels to sort of gel it together and say, oh, look, this is what somebody else thought about the book as well. Let's discuss it. Let's critique it. So the best example I have of that would be Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And what I did was I paired The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I paired it with Toni Morrison's quite famous essay titled The Amazing Troubling Book on the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, this is Tom Sawyer, but her article or essay on her opinion of why we should read Huckleberry Finn, why it's troubling, why it was really hard, if not it was until her death, it was still hard for her to read a genre like this, but that we needed to read it. So I'm pairing those two. So what I thought I'd do is read this to Morgan before I read this aloud to her. This is unabridged and unedited, so there's going to be some topics in here and some verbiage in here that we are all incredibly uncomfortable using, and I don't like to, we read banned books around here, and I also don't like to shy away from topics. This is my way of working through those topics to introduce some of the tough things while also appreciating the literature. Another example of pairing is Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. I like this book. I will read to her The Alchemist, and then afterwards I found an interesting article, a short essay published in Stanford Daily titled The Alchemist is Shallow but Inspirational, written by Shanna Hadai. And she kind of slams the book, and I like that. I think it's interesting you want to hear all sides, and you don't have to agree with them, you don't have to disagree with them. It's just interesting to read. But what I found really interesting about this article is after I read it, the writer of this article falls prey to the very thing that she accuses Paulo Coelho of doing, and her last paragraph, unless it's meant to be completely ironic, which is not necessarily clear, I would never, as the publisher or the editor of the Stanford Daily, I never would have published this essay. So I think it's a good example of just because it's published doesn't mean it's good. And just because we don't agree with it doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it or give it its due time. So those, I'm still working on it. Those are the two that I wanted to show you today of kind of pairings. Oh, there is one more. There's like one more. I think I had mentioned this with Cy Montgomery. I did pick up her book, The Soul of an Octopus. And I had mentioned that this came after an article that she wrote in Orion magazine. So I reached out and I found Orion magazine and purchased her article. And her article is in their reader on a selection of essays from Orion magazine, Animals and People. And her her article in here is Deep Intellect. It's only a few pages. It's 12 pages long. I thought I would read this article, or she could read it, and then we could read the book. So that's kind of a whole, hey, it came from this. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You can write a short article about it and then write a longer story, or an article about the story. So that's another pairing. Let's see. We're going to do all sorts of genres. Now, I meant to read Jack London's Call of the Wild this year, but we ended up reading A Wolf Called Wanderer. And I think I'm going to move this one to the 5th grade. So we will read Call of the Wild, or I will read it aloud to her next year. Some of you may have watched this old-timey movie, but it was a book first. And this is by Frank and Ernestine. It's a sibling couple, Frank and Ernestine Gilbreth, Cheaper by the Dozen. And it's just really adorable. It's about the craziness of a whole bunch of siblings and their parents, one parent being very strict and the other one not being very strict at all. And so there's some nice lighthearted humor in there. Then we will likely read aloud The War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells, S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, some other stuff that's kind of gritty that I can read aloud to her and then talk to her about. The Good and Evil of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a really short read, so we're looking forward to this part. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. I would like to read this. We didn't cover Black History Month this year because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I thought, you know what, instead of doing it poorly, I think we can wait a year to cover some cruel aspects of our background as Americans. And so I thought I would take To Kill a Mockingbird and pair it with Catherine Stockett's The Help, that also is a movie. Her book is very good. It covers way more than the movie does. And there's some topics in there that to this day you may see in certain areas in the United States, and I think they're important to talk about. So we will do that, and also pair it with the article of the death of Medgar Evers, who was the civil rights activist who was murdered in Jackson, Mississippi, and Medgar Evers is in the book The Help. So that's how we were kind of layer upon layer, and I don't know that I'm going to do it for Black History Month. I don't think that I care to have a month just about a particular thing, when I think that sort of topic, it should be discussed openly at any time. So we will just take that at any month. But what I think is also interesting is when we go and visit Washington, D.C., Medgar Evers, who was murdered by his own people in his front yard in Jackson, Mississippi, he was a World War II vet, and after his murder, he was buried in Arlington, where President Kennedy attended the service. So when we go to Washington, D.C., one of the things was we were going to go to Arlington Cemetery. And now with this, we will go visit Medgar Evers' plot. Then we have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne. There's a lot of abridged versions. And since I'm reading all of these to her as literature, these are all unabridged. And her first Jane Austen, Emma. This is a huge book. I didn't realize it was going to be that big. It's like reading 4 pages per page. And then we're going to read Morgan's first pulp fiction. I don't know if you know this, but what's the book? Both The Maltese Falcon and Tarzan are also considered pulp fiction. So I'm going to start our pulp fiction with Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. This is just really cool. It's like a 1912 or 1915, I think. And the way it's written is very strange because the monologues in here are very long, unnaturally so. They actually wouldn't have really occurred, but it tells the story through different persons' monologues, and it's interesting. It's kind of creepy. It's akin to, Swamp Thing or something like that from the Technicolor days of those creepy old-timey movies. The Shadow over Innsmouth is sort of that feel. Then we are going to read Daphne du Maurier's The Birds. Alfred Hitchcock made The Birds popular. This is her a whole bunch of stories, but we're just going to take The Birds out of this and read it. It's very, it's kind of cool. It's actually the first sort of climate change story, and this was written many years before we really talked about climate change. So this should be very interesting. Then We have, as an essay, Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. This is only 20 pages, and in my opinion, everybody should read Self-Reliance once a year. And so I'm going to start reading it with Morgan, and maybe we'll do it once a year. Now, coming from being Irish and Catholic, how can we not read something from the Dubliners, James Joyce? There's some stuff in here there's multi-layered adult themes, so I'm still kind of picking through this and considering what we will talk about and why. But again, we read banned books around here all of the time, and they can be very gritty, but I also agree with kind of screening books and keeping it as appropriate for their little minds as possible. So do know that I do keep that in mind. Then a book that is actually a grouping of stories into a book by Shirley Jackson. She was made quite famous, and a lot of people disliked her greatly for a short story called The Lottery that was published and got in the New Yorker and got people a lot of people mad in the 60s. And so this is her. We've actually read the first 4 stories. You get this strange feeling when you read her books. They kind of have this idea or the feeling of doom, like, oh, something is going to happen here, but you don't know why you have that feeling. And you're kind of left hanging because there's no real ta-da or this is why you feel horrible. Her books, her stories generally leave you hanging, kind of I can't believe that happened, but then what happened? She leaves you with that thought and doesn't let you finish it. She lets you stew over it. And so we are enjoying this already, and we'll probably continue to talk about this as a short story writer. What you'll see here is a stream also of as many international writers as I could get and as many female writers as I could. So I've got Du Maurier, I've got Jane Austen, Harper Lee. What else do I have? Oh, Jules Verne for international. And so for short stories, I like Rikki Tikki Tavi. So I got that book, or it's kind of a short story and it goes kind of along with the Jungle Book. So you can find it for free on YouTube, the old-timey cartoon for Rikki Tikki Tavi. So I thought I would read it and then we'd watch the old-timey cartoon. And this I picked up for a song. This didn't cost anything on... this is Thrift Books. Stories and Poems for Extremely Intelligent Children of All Ages. There is a Leo Tolstoy in here that I want to read, Morgan. Let's see. It's How Much Land Does a Man Need? I've always liked that story, and I've always found it, maybe we'll read that along with Self-Reliance. So that's an international author. And let's see. Oh, Rikki Tikki Tavi's in here too. And Journalism in Tennessee by Mark Twain. And then there's an E. Nesbitt, In the Dark. So there's a few things that I want to read in here, but this is huge. We're just going to keep this for a really long time. And there's poems in here too, so I'll be able to pick and choose from there. So along with poetry, because let's see, we've covered some fiction and some nonfiction. We've talked about articles and essays and short stories. Let's do plays first, because this is really fun. Morgan and I went to our first play. I'll cover that in our monthly update. It was so fun. She loved it. I didn't know what to expect. I was really hoping that she'd like it. She loved it. She really enjoyed it and laughed a lot. I am still pretty intent on doing a Shakespeare with Morgan. And so I spent a lot of time reading and deciding kind of which one am I going to do. So first I decided, well, let's do a comedy. And then which comedy are we going to do? And I picked Twelfth Night because I think it's the simplest one and it is funny. And I found a play that I think it's more of a modern play. And so what we'll do is we'll watch the play because Shakespeare is sort of meant to be watched. So we'll watch the play and then we will read the play. And I want to make sure, I think 5th grade Shakespeare needs to be done differently than high school Shakespeare, obviously. So what I did was I found No Fear Shakespeare and I picked up the 12th Night. And because there are a couple that do this, but No Fear Shakespeare was just one that I decided to go with. So his play is in original Shakespearean English here, and then it's translated into modern English here. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it exactly, but this is what I'm thinking so far. Watch the movie, and then when we dissect the play over the space of a couple weeks, I will read the old Shakespearean, and then Morgan and I will act it out together on the modern side so that she's not just reading alone. So she can pick a person or persons that she wants to be in the play, and we'll highlight it throughout the book. We'll highlight each portion that she's to read, and I'll highlight my portion, and we will sit there and read the modern English play together. Well, I will play my role and she will play hers. So I think that's how we're going to do it. And there's other ways. I got the book How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare by Ken Ludwig. I don't know that I needed this book. For one, I don't know that I needed to spend that much time learning how to do it. It's something that I think I'm already doing or already planning to do. It does walk you through how to get your child interested in Shakespeare to make it accessible to them by memorization, for instance. And so if they memorize something and then they see it or hear it elsewhere, or they see it in the play, they go, oh, wow, look at that. I know Shakespeare. And so it kind of bonds the child to the play so that they're not as intimidated by it. But what I have found is very young children are not intimidated by Shakespeare unless their parents have taught them to be intimidated by Shakespeare by saying, oh, it's really hard. I've not done that to Morgan, and so I'm hoping that she will really enjoy it. So if you are really uncomfortable with plays, if you don't like plays or don't understand kind of why you want to do a play, and or if you're very uncomfortable with Shakespeare, this really would be a great place to start. I would encourage you to pick up this book. And then I wanted to read about Shakespeare, so I picked up this was just like a couple bucks on Thrift Books, The Bard of Avon, The Story of William Shakespeare. And this is a nice book on his life and his story that I'd like to kind of kick off our Shakespearean unit study with. Now, this book I found at our used bookstore that just opened up. This is a book that I tried to steal from my sister a couple times and she caught me. But my dad bought this for her when she was 16 because she was really into Shakespeare and I wasn't. And so this is exactly, the Riverside Shakespeare is exactly her book. And I got this for $15. It probably went for even more back in the day when my dad bought it I think in the 80s, like the late 80s. This is every Shakespeare play. So the No Fear Shakespeare, I think was like $17. I couldn't find it any cheaper. If you bought every Shakespeare play for $17 a pop, it would cost you a lot. And especially if you want to kind of review a Shakespeare play and choose which, kind of use this as a flip through of, do I want this one or do I want to read this one to our kid, or do I want them to read it? This type of thing, if you can get a used one, kind of an anthology or the encyclopedia of, this is a great way to go. I would love to trade my sister for hers so she could have this one, and I still want hers because I think hers is really well annotated. So she's very into Shakespeare before I was, and my sister made Shakespeare accessible to me because she read some of it to me, and then I thought, oh, that's it? That's all it is? Because sometimes being read something that would otherwise be too difficult makes it all very accessible. And so that's the kind of the approach that I'm going to take with everything, and specifically with Shakespeare next year in the 5th grade. So that is our plays. We're going to do more, but that's all I've got now that I'm thinking of. I don't want to overdo it with plays. I think in that regard, I'm better at starting here, prepping for it, planning for it, and then taking it one little step at a time and not just overbuy a whole bunch of things we might not read. Poetry. Not only do I love the smell of this book because it's old. Who doesn't love that smell? It smells like my grandma's living room. It's awesome. But Rime of the Ancient Mariner was the first, no kidding, like, holy cow, I didn't know poems came like that, poem that my 6th grade teacher read to the class. Actually, she was the theater teacher. She was the English and the theater teacher. So she read this to us by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and it's such a good poem. I don't know if Morgan's going to be interested in me reading it to her in the 5th grade, but I saw it, and so I decided I'm going to pick it up used anyway and have it ready to go because it's just an interesting story. And these are tried and trues. We're going to keep these for a really long time. Caroline Kennedy did a really good couple of books on poems, a whole bunch of them, and Morgan's used these to use for poetry memorization. This one is Poems to Learn by Heart, and it comes with, each one is just, it has so many nice pictures. Each page, every one is a colored photo or a colored picture or painting. And then this one is her current favorite, Caroline Kennedy's A Family of Poems, My Favorite Poetry for Children. And I think this is Caroline Kennedy when she was a little girl. And Morgan's already earmarked. She's doing Ecclesiastes because it was in here. To everything there's a season and a time, to every purpose under the heavens. I think she picked it because I like to sing the song from, is it The Birds? It's brilliant. But it's a beautiful, it's beautiful. And so this is the King James version. And then she's picking, after that she wants Buffalo Dusk by Carl Sandburg. So many nice pictures in here too. And really good authors. Alfred Lord Tennyson, The Eagle. What other one does she have in here that she wants to memorize? Oh, William Shakespeare's 18th sonnet, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? So she's picked that on her own as well. Now, if you know how important it is to hear poetry, you will also know that if the poet reads it, you want to listen to that version. So Joy Harjo is the only Native American poet laureate in the United States. And I have this on order, but I picked this up from the library to show you. I guess I could have pulled it up in an image, but Joy Harjo, An American Sunrise, is, just to read it is just amazing poetry. To hear her voice read the poems as she meant them to be read is shockingly poignant. And I love it. So when we read these, I am not going to be the one reading them aloud. I'm going to have the artist herself, and we have these on Audible so she can, and this one is Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, also from Joy Harjo. And if you want to learn about her, there's several things about her on YouTube, so you can hear her talking about becoming a poet laureate, which is really impressive of where she came from and what she's chosen to do with her art. And also, let's see, we have Hafiz, because I found that there was some modern Arabic poetry, but I kept coming back to Hafiz. He's so simple, funny, sometimes vulgar. So you want to kind of pick through some of this stuff. I think it'd probably be even better in Arabic, but that's not a possible thing right now. So I've picked a few just really sweet, so simple, almost like Chinese poetry, which we're also going to do, but I haven't purchased any yet. I forgot to purchase some. But I'm going to read some of these. Sometimes they're very short. Oh, and here's the thing about buying used is somebody had left their pressed flower in here. And so I plan on doing it. And I wonder why they left it in there. Maybe they meant to read those particular poems, or those were their favorites or not. I don't know, or maybe they just threw it into a page. But whenever I find something like that in a book, I always make sure to keep it. So we'll read some of those. And if some speak to Morgan, even if they're very short, some of his are only a couple sentences long. If they speak to her, she can memorize them if she wants. Same with Joy Harjo. Although hers can be very long. Oh, some are short. Some can almost read like an essay. And so if something really talks to her there, or even if it's just like a verse, then she can choose to memorize that if she wants and take it on her own. But mostly I mean for these to expose her. Are you snorting, buddy? He just woke up from a dream. These are really meant to just expose Morgan to different genres and styles and eras, because Hafiz is from way back when, from much longer ago. And some of the poems that Caroline Kennedy picked, they're from all different ages. And then there's modern American current poetry from Joy Harjo. And let's see, yeah, that's pretty much about it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Did I cover everything? So plays, short stories, articles and essays, fiction, nonfiction, poetry. And I tried to have as many international art authors and female writers as possible. So it didn't really matter the genre, it mattered who was writing them, it didn't matter when, and that they were international. I think I couldn't find a Russian. Oh yeah, I have Tolstoy. That is what I'm thinking for literature for the 5th grade. I know that was long. But I honestly think this is really going to start to become more and more important. I think I am teaching through literature. I'm talking through literature. Morgan is, the really cool thing is that some of these things that we've read or I've read to her, she'll later on joke about, or if we're in the car, she'll say, oh, that's like so-and-so, or she made a comment the other day of nobody wants to be an Ozymandias. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Nobody does want to be. And so she is really remembering these things and taking from them, and she's learning more from me reading to her than me just talking to her about stuff or teaching her about something. She's learning through doing. She's learning from reading through other people and seeing through their eyes, and I'm going to nurture that as much as I can and as much as she wants. I hope your homeschool is going really well, and wherever you are, whoever you are, happy homeschooling, and thank you so much for watching. See you.